Hey, this is Pastor Tien. We're going to continue on in our study of the stories of the resurrection. We're going to look at the story of the one they call Doubting Thomas, and it's found in John chapter 20. So let's go ahead and read that. It says, "Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see his hands and the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe.'" And this is the reason why they call him Doubting Thomas. When the disciples told Thomas that Jesus had risen from the dead and we've seen him, he says, "You know what, guys? I know you've seen him, but I didn't. I'm not going to believe until I see for myself." He says, "Unless I see his hands and where they pierced his hands with those nails, and not only do I see it, I need to touch the place where his wounds were. And also, I want to see his side where the Roman soldier pierced him with that spear. Unless I get to inspect the body of Jesus, I'm not going to believe. I'm not going to believe." It says 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." And what was Thomas's reaction? Verse 28 says, "And Thomas answered, 'My Lord and my God.'" My Lord and my God. So we're looking at the story of Doubting Thomas, and it's kind of interesting because I think he gets a bad rap. They call him Thomas the Doubter. And I love this story because Thomas is so relatable, because we've all been there one way or another where we heard testimony from people of how God changed their lives, or how God answered prayer, this or that. And skeptically, we say, well, hey, that was great for you, but unless I see it with my own eyes, like, I'm not going to believe. I need to see it for myself. So from this story, I want to pull out a few lessons that I think we can relate to and we can apply. So this is the first lesson. The first lesson is that we each have to come to God personally. You know, faith is a personal and individual thing. It's something that is a deeply personal matter, and we can't rely just on the stories of others or the experiences of others. And here, Thomas didn't rely on the testimony of his friends. You know, he said, well, hey, that's great for you guys. You guys saw the resurrection. You saw Jesus in the flesh, but I didn't. And I need to see it for myself before I believe. You know, so that's the first lesson, that we each have to come to God personally. We each have to experience God for ourselves. You know, there's a saying that though God has a lot of children, he has no grandchildren, right? That it doesn't matter if you were raised in church and your mom had faith, and you have to come to a realization, and you have to come to God personally yourself. So that's the first lesson that we can draw from the story of Thomas, right? So the second lesson that we can draw from this story is that we should be a searcher instead of a doubter. All right, we should be a searcher, right? Don't be a doubter, be a searcher. Thomas is criticized for being, quote, the doubter, or Doubting Thomas. Like how would you like to have that nickname? Doubting Thomas, right? Thomas, I think that they treat Thomas unfairly. Thomas was one of the original 12. He gave up 3.5 years to follow Jesus, and later on he becomes a missionary, and he becomes an apostle to India. It is believed that Thomas is the founder of the Coptic Christian movement in South Asia. All right, but most people know him as, quote, Doubting Thomas, and I don't think that's fair. I think for Thomas, he wasn't a doubter. He was actually a searcher. I think Thomas was being genuine and authentic in his search for God. Like he wasn't a doubter, he was a searcher. You know, while everyone else saw the resurrected Jesus come through the locked door, Thomas wasn't there. He didn't experience it for himself. He wasn't there when that happened. They all got excited and they told him, Thomas, Jesus was here. And he thought to himself, you know what? Maybe this is too good to be true. It's like, guys, I really hope what you're saying is true, but I wasn't there. I'm going to need to see Jesus for myself. Right? I just want to tell you that searching is a good thing. Don't take my word for it. See for yourself. It's good to be a searcher, right? For some of us, we have to identify, just like Thomas, identify where you're stuck, right? Identify the areas. For Thomas, he says, you know what? If I'm going to believe, I'm going to need to have some evidence. I'm going to need to see the wounds of Christ, right? So you got to identify where you're stuck. If you want to search, what is the obstacle? What is your obstacle of faith? Thomas needed physical proof that Jesus had risen from the grave. He needed to see the scars in Jesus' hands and his side, right? So to be a searcher, you got to figure out what is the obstacle that you have to overcome. Also, be active in your search. If you want to be a searcher, you have to be active. It's interesting that even though Thomas did not yet believe, he still showed up every day to meet with the other believers. It wasn't until 8 days later that Jesus showed up. And although he wasn't yet a believer, he still showed up every single day and he asked questions. And for me, I could relate to this because I was a bit of a skeptic myself. I wanted to believe in God. I wasn't raised in the church, and it was all new to me. So I started attending church, and I started going to Bible studies for 2 whole years before I actually became a Christian. And even though I didn't yet believe, I still showed up, and I asked questions, and I searched for 2 whole years. Right? I was a searcher, not a doubter. The third lesson is this: that when God reveals himself, we need to respond appropriately. When Jesus eventually showed up 8 days later, and he showed Thomas the scars from the crucifixion, this is how Thomas responded. He says, "My Lord and my God." Right? Jesus showed up and revealed himself in just the way that Thomas asked. I would say to you, when God reveals himself, you need to respond appropriately. Thomas responded with the statement of faith, "My Lord and my God." I just want to tell you that faith in God is a deeply personal thing. We all have to come to God on our own. Some other people can help us, but they can't believe for us. We need to come to God on our own, and it's a deeply personal issue. The good news is that just as God was patient with Thomas, he's also patient with you. If you need time, God's going to be patient with you. He's going to reveal himself to you. So I want to encourage you, don't be a doubter, be a searcher. Jesus is real. Jesus loves you. He wants a relationship with you. He wants to forgive you of your sin. He has an amazing plan for your life. So be like Thomas. Be honest and active in your search for God. And if you do that, I believe you'll eventually respond like Thomas did. You'll say to Jesus, "My Lord and my God." He has risen. He has risen indeed.